The Gathering Storm, 1918-1939. The Great War ended, but peace was fragile, built on resentment and ruin. Germany lay broken under the weight of the Treaty of Versailles, its people humiliated and starving. In Italy, Mussolini promised glory through fascism. In Japan, generals dreamed of empire. And in the shadows of Munich, a failed artist named Adolf Hitler spoke to the anger of a wounded nation. As the world danced through the roaring 20s, few noticed the drums of war beating louder each year. Economic collapse in 1929 fanned desperation. Dictators found followers. Democracies turned a blind eye. By 1938, Hitler marched into Austria, then claimed Czechoslovakia while the world pleaded for peace. The storm had been brewing for 20 years, and in 1939, it finally broke. Blitzkrieg, Europe falls, 1939 to 1940. At dawn on September 1, 1939, German tanks roared across the Polish border. The sky filled with Stukas, screaming downward the world's first taste of Blitzkrieg, lightning war. Within weeks, Poland was crushed, and Britain and France declared war, but their armies stood idle behind the Maginot Line. Then, in spring 1940, the storm turned west. Denmark and Norway fell in days, followed by Belgium and the Netherlands. German panzers swept through the Ardennes terrain thought impassable, cutting Allied lines apart. France, once Europe's greatest army, collapsed in 6 weeks. British troops barely escaped across the Channel from Dunkirk's burning beaches. Europe lay under the Nazi flag, and Hitler stood triumphant. Yet across the sea, one island nation refused to yield. Britain stood alone, and the battle for civilization was about to begin. The Battle for Britain, 1940 to 1941. In the summer 1940, the fate of the free world rested in Britain's skies. The Luftwaffe launched relentless waves of bombers, seeking to crush the Royal Air Force before invading. Outnumbered and exhausted, young RAF pilots scrambled daily, flying multiple missions until fuel, ammunition, or nerves ran out. London burned during the Blitz. Families huddled in underground stations as sirens wailed above. Yet Britain would not break. Radar, courage, and Churchill's defiance turned the tide. We shall never surrender. By autumn, Hitler's invasion plans crumbled. The RAF had won the first major victory against Nazi Germany. Europe remained enslaved, but the world saw that Hitler's forces could be stopped, and hope flickered once more. Barbarossa, the Eastern Inferno, 1941 to 1942. June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers invaded the Soviet Union in the largest military assault in history. At first it was unstoppable. Cities fell, prisoners filled endless columns, and the Red Army seemed doomed. But as summer turned to winter, the German advance froze with the land itself. Temperatures plunged below 30 degrees Celsius. Engines stalled, rifles jammed, soldiers froze where they stood. The Soviets, hardened and unyielding, counterattacked at Moscow. Entire divisions were swallowed by snow and fire. Behind the lines, villages were annihilated. Millions perished. On the Eastern Front, war lost all humanity. It became a struggle of annihilation. The invincible Wehrmacht had met its match. Pearl Harbor. The sleeping giant awakes. 1941. December 7, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning shattered by the roar of Japanese planes over Pearl Harbor. Within minutes, bombs and torpedoes tore through American battleships, flames turning the harbor into chaos. Over 2,400 Americans died. The next day, President Roosevelt called it a date which will live in infamy. The United States declared war on Japan, and soon after, Germany declared war on America. The conflict was now truly global. Factories thundered to life, millions enlisted, and a sleeping giant awoke. Across the Pacific, island strongholds became battlegrounds. In Europe, Allied forces found new strength. The age of neutrality was over, and total war had begun. The turning tide. 1942 to 1943. The Axis advance met its limits. In the Pacific, U.S. carriers struck back at Midway, sinking 4 Japanese carriers and halting Japan's momentum. In North Africa, Rommel's Africa Corps faced defeat at El Alamein, where Montgomery's forces broke through after months of brutal desert warfare. But the true turning point came in the ruins of Stalingrad. Soviet soldiers fought street by street, refusing to yield a single building. Surrounded and starving, the German Sixth Army finally surrendered in February 1943. The myth of Nazi invincibility was shattered. For the first time since 1939, the world began to believe victory might be possible. Resistance in shadows. 1943 to 1944. Across occupied Europe, the fight for freedom burned in secret. In the forests of Poland, Rail lines exploded under cover of night. In France, partisans sent coded messages to London and sabotaged German convoys. Even within Germany, quiet acts of defiance spread. Leaflets, hidden shelters, whispered hope. The Gestapo hunted relentlessly. Torture and executions followed. Yet courage persisted. In Denmark, citizens ferried thousands of Jews to safety in small fishing boats. In Warsaw, resistance fighters rose against impossible odds. Every act of rebellion, no matter how small, carried the same message: tyranny would not last forever. D-Day and the liberation of Europe, 1944. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Under gray skies and roaring surf, thousands of Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy. Many never made it past the waves, but those who did carved a path through fire and steel. The largest invasion in history had begun. Within weeks, Paris was liberated, and the Allies pushed east toward Germany. For civilians, the cost was immense: cities in ruins, families torn apart. But hope returned with every mile retaken. As church bells rang across a free Paris, it seemed the nightmare might finally end. Yet the war's darkest moments were still to come. The fall of the Axis, 1944 to 1945. The Nazi Empire crumbled under relentless assault. From the west came the Allies. From the east, the Red Army. German cities burned under endless bombing raids. In the Ardennes, Hitler's last gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, failed. By April 1945, Soviet troops encircled Berlin. In his underground bunker, Hitler chose suicide over surrender. Days later, Germany fell silent. In the Pacific, Japan fought on, even as cities turned to ashes. Then came Hiroshima and Nagasaki, two blinding flashes that ended an era. On September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri, Japan surrendered. After 6 years and over 60 million deaths, the Second World War was finally over. The world reborn, 1945 and beyond. Peace returned, but the world was forever changed. Entire nations lay in ruins, millions displaced, and the true horrors of the Holocaust came to light. The United Nations was born from the ashes, a fragile hope to prevent another global tragedy. Old empires crumbled as new powers rose. America and the Soviet Union, their uneasy alliance already turning cold. Across continents, survivors rebuilt lives from rubble, carrying scars that would never fade. The war had ended, but its lessons endured. That freedom demands vigilance, and that even in humanity's darkest hour, courage and compassion can light the way forward. Over 70 million people died, soldiers and civilians alike. Every 6 seconds, someone lost their life between 1939 and 1945. The Soviet Union suffered the heaviest toll, more than 26 million dead, many of them civilians. The Holocaust claimed 6 million Jewish lives, men, women, and children, murdered simply for who they were. Warsaw, Berlin, and Tokyo were reduced to rubble, entire cities flattened within days. 400,000 American soldiers never returned home, but their sacrifice helped end tyranny across continents. At its height, the war spanned over 30 countries, involving 100 million people under arms. Hiroshima's atomic bomb killed around 140,000 people from a single flash of light. When peace was signed in 1945, more than 60 million refugees wandered a shattered world. Out of the destruction rose hope, the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and a generation determined to say, never again.